Hello and welcome to the Marana Business Community Podcast, presented by the Marana Chamber of Commerce. In this space, we feature local business leaders making a difference in the Marana community. They share information about their business, what makes them successful, what they have learned, and tips to help you in your business or daily life. I'm Amanda Wiggins, your host for today's podcast. Alrighty, welcome to this episode of the Marana Business Community Podcast. Today we have Brian White, owner and operator of the Chick-fil-a at Thornydale, a location my family visits often. So we're so excited to have you here today, Brian.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So tell us about yourself. Who is Brian White and what's been your path to here today?
Yeah, so I've been married to my wife, Trisha, for 21 years, and we have two daughters, a senior and a sophomore, and we're a very outdoor family, so we love Tucson and the outdoor lifestyle. And then I moved here 4 years ago from Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and prior to Chick-fil-a, I worked at Fleet Feet Sports, which is a run retail specialty franchise. And so we had two locations, one at Chapel Hill, one at Durham, and then we also worked at the corporate office. And then before that, I was a firefighter and also a swim coach. So I've done a variety of things.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Tell us about Chick-fil-a at Thornydale. What's that been like, that journey starting and where you are today?
Yeah, it's been amazing. So we will be 4 years, actually, October 5th. So we're getting excited for our 4-year celebration.
Absolutely.
And so when we moved here, there was only 3 Chick-fil-A's in Tucson, so we were the 4th. And Chick-fil-a kind of forecasted that was the sweet spot to really gain some market relevancy, kind of one store for every 250,000 people roughly. So we opened up, and then about a year and a half after we opened, the I-19 location opened. And so that really has given the market some good momentum, and we've got some amazing other operators, and so we do a lot collectively and have a partnership with U of A Athletics, and so yeah, it's been a fun journey.
Yeah, and I've seen you guys definitely support community with that location. Often I'll go through and there'll be a team out there, a sports team, kind of young kids and things like that, promoting what they're doing. So is that important to you as well as Chick-fil-a?
Absolutely, yeah. And so I think for us, that's kind of the byproduct of what we get to do. Obviously, we hope we provide really good quality food, really safe, an amazing environment, but then it's the community. And I think being part of the Northwest Tucson, Marana, Oro Valley communities has just been an absolute blessing. And so we have a lot of partnerships with local high schools and with spirit events for a lot of clubs and elementary schools, and so kids, teachers, and public safety are huge passions of ours.
Wonderful. That aligns what it sounds like your passions too as well. So what sparked kind of your direction with owning and operating a business? Yeah,
so as I mentioned before, I started out as a swim coach. My dad was a career swim coach for club team, and so growing up, I was a swimmer and a triathlete, and just kind of fell into it and loved it. And at the time, I kind of said, I think everyone should have to coach at some point in their life, because you learn to deal with kids and you learn to deal with parents. And the other thing I always wanted to do was be a firefighter. And so I ended up leaving coaching to go into firefighting. And at that time, I said, hey, I think everyone should be in public safety of some aspect to be able to serve community and learn what real trauma situations are and how to respond in those kind of high stress environments. And then at the time, my wife opened up Fleet Feet in Savannah, Georgia with that owner. He moved to town and we met him, and so she was his first employee. And I think about 2 minutes into that journey, she said it would be amazing if we could ever have our own store. And so a few years later, kind of things progressed, and we were able to move to Chapel Hill and take over a location there. And so then that just kind of started a whole nother journey. And I think the entrepreneurial spirit of being able to, like I've always said, you could wake up in the morning, have an idea, and by 10 o'clock in the morning, you can be implementing it. And so I like that kind of on the ground, grassroots.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So what's been your journey and unique experience to being a franchise owner, and especially one as beloved as Chick-fil-a, and why that direction?
Yeah, and so it was interesting with Chick-fil-a. So through Fleet Feet, it's, again, very community driven. And so, it's a run retail specialty store, but we would serve basically anybody with feet. So, nurses would come in who were on their feet all day, or little old ladies would come in and would need a stable shoe. And so just a variety of people that we served. And so through that, we were involved in a lot of community events. And then that kind of introduced me to some Chick-fil-A owner operators. And so we ended up just kind of meeting occasionally to talk family and life and business. And I would come home and tell Trisha how cool it was, because we obviously love Chick-fil-A from a product standpoint. And then I think, like a lot of people, we always looked at Chick-fil-A from an experience standpoint in our business at that time, and kind of asking those questions like, how do we become more like Chick-fil-A? And not just by saying my pleasure, but just in, like what is that secret sauce? And so getting to know some of the other owner operators was pretty inspiring. And again, I would come home and share that with Trisha. And then one day she said, you should apply and see if you can get a restaurant. At the time, I had no idea what that even entailed or what it would look like. And it was a 2.5-year journey. So it's a very long process. I think the year I applied, I think there were 60,000 applicants, and they only open up a little over 100 restaurants. So wow. It's a patience game, but obviously well worth it. Yeah, so we super fortunate that we ended up out here too.
So I've heard, Brian, that a lot of our problems would be solved if we had the drive-through operations of Chick-fil-A and other aspects of our daily life. Tell us about that. That's a very well-oiled machine there.
Yeah. Those memes make it look easy.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it's anything but easy. But no, I think that's, and even last year, or I guess the last year and a half of the pandemic, I think it was one example of things that Chick-fil-A has done as a brand to prepare, and the fact that we were able to take the entire play outside into the parking lot. And there was a lot of creativity with Chick-fil-A's across the country, converting their parking lot to 3 and 4 lane drive-throughs, and just a variety of business models, which I think is really going to be the future through delivery and through mobile. How do we serve guests in other ways than just having to come through our drive-through or through the dining room? But yeah, it is amazing, and I scratch my head sometimes as well with just how many cars can get through that double stack drive-through.
Exactly. That's one drive-through I'm not afraid to get into when I see it's a long line. So that speaks a lot to the work of your team there as well.
Yeah, it's an amazing team, and I think it's always a work in progress. And I think even for as good as we are, we have a long way to go. And I think that's the fun part with it, is every day, every week, we have meetings. How do we get more efficient? And we're able to kind of borrow and steal from other Chick-fil-A's all over the country who have really done some pretty cool innovations. And even through COVID, there were a lot of innovations that came from team members all over the country that then Chick-fil-A is able to take and consolidate into a little bit more legitimate platform. And so I think we'll see some things in the years ahead that really came from COVID.
So Brian, I've met a lot of business owners in this podcast, and it's funny that several of them started as coaches. And so when you made that statement, we're really great, but we've got more to do, and we've got, we can be better. Tell me about what that transition has been like for you, from, coaching teams to coaching, your business teams and that.
Yeah, I hate the term manager. And so from day one, we've never really used that, or we've tried not to. And instead I preferred to call our leaders coaches, because to me, oftentimes managers are just trying to manage consequences, kind of like a do this or else, or hey, don't make me look bad. Whereas a coach, like if you were to come in today and I were to say, hey, you're going to be taking over operations for the rest of the day, you can't stand there and say, well, hey, I didn't recruit this team. I didn't, create these systems. Instead, you'd come in and say, okay, how do I get the best out of each individual? So I often say it's kind of like sometimes we're working, with the bad news bears, and we're taking just amazing people, but especially right now with the war on talent, there's a lot of new people there, and so there's a lot of mistakes happening all day long. And so through that, I believe that strong leaders are much more effective as coaches than anything else. So yeah, I definitely like to organize the team and talk about the team from that aspect of like a sports team more than a business team.
Absolutely. And then additionally, I heard you say the war on talent, and that's another thing a lot of our business owners are talking about. So what's been unique about your experience, and where have you seen, an ability to overcome this with your group?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think Chick-fil-A is especially historically have been in a position where we've been able to be a little bit more selective on recruiting and hiring and onboarding and really finding, the whole thing of hire slow, fire quick. It's the exact opposite right now, and it's just kind of survival in that environment, which again is kind of fun in some ways. I mean, it's not always fun when don't have the bench that we need and we've got multiple call outs and COVID protocols and just trying to get by. And again, that just goes back to the team. They're absolutely amazing at what they do. But I think we've had examples where we've had someone apply this morning. We will call them immediately, schedule an interview for this afternoon at 3:00, and they don't show up because they already found another job. And so just the speed of which we have to do things has definitely changed. And then I think at the end of the day, we need a certain amount of people to be able to operate. And I think within our operations, again, you just look at the drive-through play, there's just a lot of people out there to make that happen. And so, again, we're super blessed that we have team members that have really stepped up, leaders who have stepped up over the last year and a half. Ironically, I think it's actually been a little more challenging in the recent weeks, more so than it was throughout all of COVID. But I think we see light at the end of the tunnel, and we'll definitely get through it. And I think our go back to the team of just being amazing responders to what's in front of them. I think that's been the most inspiring thing is we've gotten through it, but at some point we're ready to kind of start being a little more strategic than just like survival mode. We want to thrive instead of survive.
Yes.
So that's something we're definitely looking forward to.
Yeah, I think that's important to remember that every person that we're interacting with, whether it's in a drive-through or in an environment like that or doctor's office, it's all people.
Yeah.
And it's people that are carrying this extra weight right now. That
we went out for a brunch recently, and so my wife and two girls. And they told us it'd be about 20 minutes to get in, and it ended up being an hour. And then we sat down, and they couldn't even bring us glasses. They had to bring plastic cups because they didn't have a dishwasher to be able to wash the dishes. We noticed a waitress crying because she just got yelled at by a guest. So I looked at the girls and I just said, hey, this is the industry right now. And so it's hard because why would you want to subject yourself to that? Mm-hmm. And so again, the people who are working in the restaurant industry and the people who are working at Chick-fil-A, it's absolutely amazing. I mean, they're just amazing people.
Yeah. And it's on each of us that are, visiting these service industries to remember that it's people behind this, and we've got to support community and, the people in these positions. So, what has been your favorite thing about this industry? Maybe before these 2 years or pre the 2 years of, but anything you want to share about this industry specifically? I know that, you've had other businesses and that sort of thing, but.
Yeah, I think it honestly goes back to the people, and it's interesting to say because oftentimes you can say, hey, the biggest asset, obviously kind of cliche, is your people. Mm-hmm. And also the biggest challenges in a business are often people. We have over 100 people that work for us at Chick-fil-A, which surprises a lot of people just in a little 4-wall quick service restaurant. But those 100 people are made up of all walks of life, and I think that's what's amazing, that we get to go in and do life together, and there's different ages and different belief systems and different demographics. But when we come in, the goal is to outwork and outnice our guest expectations, treat every guest like a king or queen. And then my expectations or goals for the restaurant are to be the safest, the cleanest, the best tasting, and the friendliest in Arizona. And so when you jump on that team and you've got kind of big goals like that, it's just amazing. And oftentimes I'll look around and I'll go around and I'll be elbow pumping everybody. And it's just, there's a love for the team. And I think when it comes down to just how hard it is, we often say too that you can probably go to other places around Marana and work half as hard than you're going to have to at Chick-fil-A. And so again, I think it's just a unique personality or type of people. And again, I like that it's just made up of an entirely different group, and we come together and say, hey, we want to serve with honor, dignity, and respect, and how we do that together. And it's also interesting because in the chaos of life, but also in the business, and then you throw COVID on top of it, and then you get hangry during shifts, emotions come out.
You're smelling that food all day, right?
Exactly. and I love that though, that like I want our team, and I often say I want us to be raw and transparent with each other. And at church we have a saying that it's okay to not be okay. It's just not okay to stay that way. And so I often say that within the restaurant too, that we want to be vulnerable with each other, because I think that's how we get better and that's how we grow. Because again, we're always trying new things, we're always innovating. And so it's definitely not just like turn the lights on and come in and do our thing. Like every day is trying to figure out new ways to be different and to be better. And I think to be able to do that collectively, and some of the best ideas and the best execution obviously comes from the experts who are the ones on the ground doing it and living it.
What advice would you give yourself, before business ownership, knowing what you know now?
It's interesting. Yeah, they often say in this one, business in general, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I knew that going in, and it was interesting because even through the Chick-fil-A selection process, part of that interview process is they interview the spouse to basically identify, hey, do you know what you're getting yourself into? And Trisha did, because we worked Fleet Feet together. And even when we were in Fleet Feet, we would often sit on some of the franchise selections at that time, because again, we were there. And so we got to meet people, and everybody knows that they work hard already, or thinks that they work hard. But then when you get into a small business, it's just another level, and it's a passion, it's a requirement, and there's seasons within that. And so I think it was interesting because there was a point in our process where Trisha looked at me and she goes, hey, I need you home more, and I need you more home when you're home. And I was like, heard. And it's interesting because we did it together. We know it, but business can be all consuming, regardless of what industry it is. And
your family's changing during that.
Yeah,
exactly. Girls were getting older.
Yeah. And so that was a good conversation of just like, okay, I have to balance this a little bit more. And obviously we know that there's going to be those seasons. And I would say even probably we might even be one right now where it's just that there's a different focus than there will be 3 months from now or 3 months ago. And then that's kind of the fun part. But I think it's just trying to keep that balance of just being a well-rounded individual, which makes you a better, well-rounded leader of the family, leader of the business. And I think that that's more sustainable, because I think we can artificially achieve anything in business or in life short term. But what are the long-term consequences because of that?
What have been the best resources that have helped you along the way? I can assume some with your family as well as the structure Chick-fil-A's provided, but what resources have helped you?
Yeah, so I think within Chick-fil-A, super blessed that we have this network of owner-operators who we're all doing the same thing, but we're doing it very differently. And so we're always learning from each other. And we just got back actually last week. The Tucson market went to the Baltimore market, and we toured around. We called it an excellence trip, and visited other Chick-fil-A's operators, some specific things we wanted to look at, either through Chick-fil-A delivery or Chick-fil-A drive-through, or just how leaders are setting up their restaurants. And so I think that's big, just always be a curious learner. And then for me, I usually listen to a podcast a day, which allows me to, and they're all different varieties of podcasts, but I think there's always nuggets in everything. And same thing with conversations of just even talking to guests or guests asking questions, and then that just kind of leads to one thing. And so I think just being a curious learner is probably the best resource, and just finding little takeaways from anything that we can achieve.
What are there any misunderstandings about your industry that the community might have?
Yeah, I think it's interesting with, I don't know the industry, but within Chick-fil-A, people, and I've had guests kind of pull me inside and say, hey, I'd love to meet and just kind of talk through your training process, because you guys have an amazing team. So I'd love to kind of see what Chick-fil-A has. And I think they just assume it's a little shot that we give everyone in the arm that creates like the Chick-fil-A magic. And I wish there was. And if there's anyone listening that knows how to create that, I will love to talk to you.
Yeah.
But again, it's so different for every restaurant, the way that our teams are set up and how we do certain things. And obviously we have Chick-fil-A procedures, and there's a lot of resources for that. But when it comes to, like, if you were to come today and start working for us, you would have a very different training experience than if you went across town and trained there. So I think that's been probably the biggest surprise. Is I think a lot of people just assume that we've just got this little manual that here you go, but it truly is a a small business. Again, we got a procedure for everything when it comes to how do we cook the chicken and how do we make our lemonade and how do we make a milkshake. But at the end of the day, like how it's actually being executed and how we are actually training on it is pretty individualized.
When you're back into thriving mode, what is next for Brian White and what is your vision for this community?
Yeah, so when we were in that Baltimore market, a operator told me, he goes, I challenge the team a lot that if our doors were to close down today, how big of a void would there be in the community? And not from the sense of like, I can't go get my Chick-fil-A anymore. I mean, obviously that's who we are and that's what allows us to come in and exist. But I think it's those other things that you were talking about earlier, like all of the things that we're involved in within the community. And I think that really kind of struck home. And I think I've probably thought about that, but in a different way. But I think how we articulated that is really good of just truly like, how are we the hub for, like when we were in Flea Feet, we were the hub for the running community. And so that was races and events and clinics. But I think with in the food industry, everyone eats. And so how are we more than that? Again, we want to be the best taste in the state, but how are we the experience that people come to thrive as individuals? And we certainly have that. We have our regulars that come in and I tell the team this all the time, like the impact that they have on that guest is truly life-changing. And we've heard tons of stories about that where there's just a lot of loneliness out there right now and hopelessness. And if they can find that from Chick-fil-A, that's amazing. And I think within the community, if we can support youth sports and we can support schools and we can support all of those activities, it's great. And then you get 3-year-olds who are in love with Chick-fil-A and
like mine.
Yeah.
I was telling Brian before we started recording.
Yeah, and that's what's amazing is it's definitely a passion brand beyond just the food. And again, it's got to be right with the food, and we've got to get it accurate, and we've got to have those kind of things. But then all the other things that we get to do because we are Chick-fil-A, and because our passions are community driven. So I think that's something just to continue to grow. And I think where we are after only 4 years is I'm very happy with that. But I'd like to see what else we could do. And then I think also if the opportunity would be there, which I believe there will, to be able to have a second Chick-fil-A somewhere in this general area over the next few years would definitely be an awesome thing, just to be able to be a little more convenient to our guests. Again, as we continue to grow, just to take some of the capacity challenges off of our current building, and then just really, especially for our team and for our leaders, be able to truly make careers. And I think we can do that out of one, but I think when you get to two, you really can make some pretty nice long-term career options for leaders.
Well, from the Chamber of Commerce, from a community member and also beloved patron of your business, I'll be ready for a second location and ready to support it. So
Awesome.
So often I have seen a lot of the commercial promotion and then of the amazing stories that happen between team members. And then also driving by, I'll see somebody sitting there and I'll say, I wonder what their story is. Someone enjoying their breakfast on a, weekday, just kind of with their paper and that sort of thing. So are there any stories that have stuck out to you over the last 4 years of people or your team or anything like that you'd want to share?
Yeah, well, Chick-fil-A has this training video. Well, I don't know if it's a training video. It's actually out there on YouTube, and it's called Every Life Has a Story. And it's just that concept. And it's a little outdated of a video, but back when it was filmed was the idea that every guest that comes in has a story. And so it would show like a single mom with a daughter and kind of the challenges that she's going through that day. And then like older lady that lost her husband this year, but it's their anniversary, and so she's at Chick-fil-A, and someone whose son just got deployed. So just all of these things, right? And like life is messy and life is complicated, but again, if we can kind of be that safe haven of a place to come in to get consistent experience, but then just team members to love on them. And I think there are so many stories, and again, of just individuals that have almost become like an extended family. And actually there was a story, it wasn't at our location, but at another Chick-fil-A, where a guest came in to eat and had planned on committing suicide that day. And a team member came up and just started talking to them. Didn't even probably think twice of it, but that conversation basically saved their life. And I think, again, there's stories like that all over the place. But I think when you start looking at Chick-fil-A and those red couch commercials for truly how like these team members, like the the simple one is a team member chasing after a car because they forgot sauces, right? And that's just kind of more of a service. But then you start looking at how truly life has been impacted because of these team members, and it's just absolutely, again, just amazing at who these people are that decide to come in and just be a part of this brand and just love on people and serve people and just try to provide these unique experiences in and amongst the chaos, which is, I think, even more special.
Yeah, I've seen that. I think that's ingrained in your team. I was going through the drive-thru and one of the ladies had complimented my hair and then told me she was going through cosmetology school. And I just thought that was so cool that, this is a part of her journey and that she's doing something else as well that will be maybe the next step in her life. So I think that you guys foster that well, that this is a journey and every life has a story.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think my goal is if they can look back at their time at Chick-fil-A, whether it was for 6 months or 6 years, during school, after school, middle of life, and say, hey, that was one of the most fun jobs I ever had. And it was super hard. Yeah. And the guests have super high expectations. But the things that I learned and the fact that I was able, and so as I said, I think everyone should be a swim coach. Everyone should be a firefighter EMT. I think, a business owner, but I also think everyone should work at Chick-fil-A because I think what it teaches you just about life and be able to handle that pressure and that chaos and be able to do it with a smile and be able to love on people during that is a pretty unique skill. And so I think it's amazing. It's really cool to hear the stories, like on the other side of the impact it's had on the guests. I remember we were open for only a few months and a high schooler came up to me and she said, hey, thank you so much for hiring me because I'm so much more confident at school. I can talk to my teachers much better than I've ever been able to. I can get up in front of the class much better than I've ever been able to. And so it is, I think, life-changing on a lot of different levels.
That's wonderful. And then we'll share all of your social media. What is the best way for listeners to hear what's happening at this location and that?
Yeah, so Facebook and Instagram are probably our two. And so that's at CFA Ina. And then Instagram is CFA _Ina. Okay. And then the mobile app is actually probably the absolute best way to stay engaged. And so we have a program called Spotlight where we do a lot of rewards and send special treats through the app. And so that's a communication tool for us as well.
That's awesome. Well, this has been really wonderful to talk to you today, Brian. I'm excited that you're our owner-operator in our community, and we've got to hear more of your story. I think that you really embody the brand of Chick-fil-A, and so it's great to see that and then also to meet you today.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for all that you guys are doing for the community.
Absolutely. Thank you to Anstar Production Group for the recording of our podcast today. Have a great day.